Welcome to the latest edition of our AT Kearney, The Wave of the Future podcast series. I'm Helen Clegg, and I'm joined today by Hagen, Goetz, Hastenteufel, and Mirjam Telzerow. Today's topic is transformation in the telecom industry. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Hagen Goetz Hastenteufel is a partner with AT Kearney and is based out of our Berlin office in Germany. Hagen's industry expertise covers the communications, media, and technology sector, and he has over 19 years of helping companies through transformation programs. Mirjam is a principal with AT Kearney and is also based out of our Berlin office. Mirjam is a transformation and change management expert in the telecoms and media sector. Hagen and Mirjam, welcome to the podcast. You recently co-authored an AT Kearney Ideas and Insights paper about transformation in the telecom industry based on interviews with over 50 C-level executives and, of course, your own deep sector experience. Hagen, what is your definition of transformation, and why do telecom operators need to transform the way they do business today?
Well, Helen, when you talk to people who use the word transformation, everyone seems to have a very different definition. What we understand by transformation is all the programs or initiatives that a company is performing to change their status quo with the aim to improve their performance, either in a certain area or across the entire company. So typical examples would include cost reduction programs, post-merger integrations, fixed mobile integrations in telecoms, revenue growth programs, reorganizations, large-scale process reengineering, etc., etc. Now, why transformation is an important topic in the telecoms area is because the industry is going through a tremendous change at the moment, and there are mainly four major challenges that the industry is facing. The first one is market saturation. We see the end of market growth in Europe, both in mobile and in fixed. We see a commoditization of the traditional telecom services. And we also start to realize that the growth in the data market will probably not be big enough to offset the decline in the traditional markets. So market saturation is one of the major challenges. The second one is the strong and even increasing competition. We see price levels falling dramatically in most countries because of this fierce competition. We see a significant need for market invest to prevent from losing market shares. And we see even new players entering the market. The OTT players is one example. And in some markets, we also see new MVNOs entering the market. The third challenge that the industry is facing is increasing regulation. We see, especially in Europe, regulators becoming more and more directive in reducing customer prices by regulating roaming charges, as an example, or MRTs. And at the same time, regulators are increasingly involved in operator investment decisions by blocking or slowing down those investments in new technologies in certain countries. And the fourth major challenge for the industry is technology and investment. We see a lot of new technologies, we see increasing data traffic, and all these things require important investments in network and in IT, which are difficult to finance, especially when markets are under pressure and prices are under pressure. So that is the fourth important point for telecom operators at the moment in Europe.
Now, Mirjam, your research shows that 45% of the telecom C-level executives that you interviewed had implemented at least 2 transformation programs within the past 3 years. Some 18% had implemented 4 or more programs within the past 3 years as well. So my question to you is, what kinds of programs are telecom operators implementing, and which programs are the most popular?
Yeah, operators have a kind of hot list of transformation programs, the ones we interviewed. And it started, not surprisingly, with an overall performance improvement. So nearly all operators we have interviewed have done 1 or 2 performance improvements, really targeting at OPEX and improving the current cost position. Then the next 2 topics are more specifically, so that's a specific functional improvement, which usually targets like the sales costs, the marketing cost effectiveness. So where the operator really focused on specific parts of their cost position, followed by a capital expenditure improvement, often combined with a working capital improvement. And then what we also have seen is a lot of operators already tried a revenue push, where it's about the go-to-market approach, not only about the investment, but also about the strategy. The next couple of topics operators have mentioned are integrations of fixed and mobile organization, often seen in Europe, a general service improvement, but also cultural change programs and leadership developments for those operators who already took a broader perspective on their organizational model. Interestingly enough, what we've heard that 18% of our CXOs have already done more than 4 programs within the last 3 years.
Mirjam, you've just mentioned the different types of programs that telecom operators are implementing. Now, in the paper that you co-authored with Hagen, you talk about the evolution of the different telecom transformation programs. Can you tell us a little bit about that evolution, the 4 main program models that you see in the evolution, and how they differ in their objectives?
Yeah, indeed. There are 4 main projects or programs. We can cluster the projects I just mentioned, and it really depends on the pressure on profitability the operator is facing, what program they choose. So the first choice is usually a budget assurance. This could be a functional improvement, but also targeting a broader perspective, where it is mainly focused on quick wins, so really ensuring the budget for the next year, the next quarter, the next half year. If pressure on profitability, especially on long-term profitability, increase, operators' choice goes for a more functional transformation, where it is not only about a quick cost reduction, but rethinking processes, rethinking procedures to improve the functional performance. And if profitability pressure increase, and if it's more about market share gain and more about a general change of the way of the business operation, operators go into an end-to-end company-wide transformation. And here, also the complexity of the programs increase significantly. More people need to be involved. The time horizon is usually much longer than for the other 2 programs I just mentioned. And last but not least, and this requires a big step change, usually is a culture or even business model shift, where it's in long-term perspective about employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, market share gain, really ensuring the long-term sustainable performance of the operator and the market.
Hagen, implementing programs can often be challenging. From your perspective, what are some of the common pitfalls that you've seen telecom operators make when trying to execute a transformation program?
Well, there are quite a few that we can see in the market, but let me perhaps summarize the 3 most important ones. The first is that we see programs that are poorly scoped. Either they are too narrowly scoped, which means they only focus on one function or one part of the organization or just on one process, and the company tries to improve this part, sometimes even creating bigger trouble outside this immediate scope of the transformation program. So either the programs are too narrowly scoped or that are so broad that they eventually die of their own weight, and the company is no longer able to run this whole complex program after a while. So that's the one and probably the most often issue that we see in the market. The second is a lack of alignment. And when I say lack of alignment, I mean on the one hand side, a lack of alignment between the program as such and the strategy a company is actually trying to follow. So that basically the transformation program is doing things that do not at all fit with the strategy that they pursue. And a lack of alignment within the company, be it between different functions of the organization or be it between different parts of the operating model when I talk about IT, processes, organization, or the capability of their people. And the third is a lack of ownership and urgency that we sometimes see. Sometimes you have a board which is totally committed and wants to get this transformation program into the company and make it successful, but you are lacking ownership on the lower level of the organization, which is wondering why they should actually participate in this. Or you even see sometimes programs that are very well accepted by the lower level of the organization because they see the need for such programs, but they are lacking the support from their top management to actually make it a success.
And Hagen, this leads me nicely to my next question, which is, what elements are necessary then for a successful transformation program?
Well, the answer is, of course, linked to the three major issues that I mentioned. And again, I would give you three answers to what needs to be part of a good transformation. The first thing is what we call strategy translation. That means before you start a transformation program, you need to be clear about the strategy, and you need to understand what you actually need to have in place in your operating model to make this strategy work. So typically you would ask about what are the value drivers of our business, and then you would ask what are the things that need to happen in our operating model, be it on the organizational side, be it in processes, be it in technology, be it in the way how you work with partners, or how you leverage your staff to make those value drivers being in place. And that includes what we call allowing the team the disruptive permission. So not just thinking in terms of, okay, what can we do in 2 or 3 or 6 months, but taking the freedom to think ahead and see what are the real structural changes that we need, perhaps even if they take more than 6 months or a year to be implemented. So this translation of the strategy is a very important element. The second one, I mentioned before that we see a poor alignment in some programs. We believe the second key ingredient for a successful transformation is this alignment, is the alignment across the organization, which you typically do by shifting away from a functional organization of your transformation program more into an end-to-end perspective. And this end-to-end perspective can be done by following certain processes that cut across your organization, or that you work around certain themes like complexity reduction, like simplification, like digitalization, which allow you to solve issues not only in one function, but in several functions of the company. And at the same time, when we talk alignment between, again, the building blocks of the operating model. So when you do changes in the organization, you need to make sure that those changes are aligned with your process landscape. When you do changes in the IT side, you need to make sure that your people are aligned with the new capabilities that they need to display to actually leverage the new functionalities of your IT. So alignment across the organization between functions, and also alignment between the different building blocks of the operating model. And the third is that beside all these conceptual things, you need to make sure that things are happening in your organization. And that's why we believe for a good transformation, you need to win employees' hearts and minds. You need to make sure that you shift ownership from the top management that is typically driving such programs to the broad range of different levels in the organization, and that they own this program and that they understand from their mind, but also that they belong to this program with their heart. If you get these three things right, then we believe you can have a very successful transformation program, which is only fixing the problems that need to be fixed and not everything that you could fix in an organization. And especially with the third point, with the good transformation and change management, you typically are able to implement in your organization what we call self-replicating change capabilities, which allow an organization to constantly support the change that will be required over the next years.
So, Mirjam, if we look at Europe, where on the transformation journey do you see the different telecom operators today? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, European operators were really hit by regulation, by competitive challenges, by challenging customers. So they all started, and that's what our survey has shown, they all started transformation programs already, and most of them have already done a couple of those transformation programs. I think from my perspective, the big question and the big journey is still in the middle. So according to our program clusters, they did the budget assurance, they did the functional transformation. But what we haven't seen so often yet is the really end-to-end company-wide transformation or real step change into a business model shift. So in a nutshell, I would say they're on the middle of the transformation path with a lot of things they've already done, but still some things ahead they could still do.
At the beginning of the podcast, we talked about the pace of change within the telecom industry and the amount of disruption it is seeing in terms of new technology and other triggers. Mirjam, what are the quick wins for telecom operators today?
Yeah, the quick wins really much depend on the operator situation, the market environment, but also on the kind of projects and programs the operator has already done. So some operators have focused very much on cost efficiency, cost improvement so far. Those operators typically have some quick wins left in the go-to-market strategy, in the pricing approach, so where they can improve within a relatively short time to make sure that they can show the impact of the transformation for the stakeholders, but also for the employees, for the motivation. Other operators have more focused on acquisition, on growth topics so far, and those operators might have some quick wins left in the improvement, in the cost improvement, in the process redesign, in the organizational adjustment. So there are quick wins left. From my perspective, it really much depends on the operator situation and what the operator has done so far.
Hagen, for those operators that have already done the quick wins and harvested that low-hanging fruit, where do you see the next set of opportunities?
So the interesting thing is that you always find low-hanging fruits, and that is probably because pressure on telecom operators increases, and the willingness to do certain things increases as well over time. But it's clear that these low-hanging fruits are more and more difficult to find and to execute, and that's why reality is that transformation programs in telecom operators today become more and more complex. And to avoid that when optimizing one part of the organization, you create trouble around this part of the organization, you actually have to go more and more into end-to-end company-wide transformations. That is what you need to do, and that means that takes more time, it is more complex, but on the other hand, the changes that you're going to implement are typically much more sustainable, and they improve much more long-term the performance of the company.
And finally, Hagen, what are your recommendations to telecom operators who are keen to implement a transformation program?
Well, first, when you do transformation, I think you need to be clear about your strategy and about who you want to be in 5 years or 10 years from now. And this strategy gives direction. It allows, as we explained earlier, to translate the strategy into what is required in the operating model. And it is then very important to draft the target operating model that you want to be in, let's say, in 3 or 5 years from now. And from this, you can then develop the different transformation initiatives that you need to follow. And by always keeping the target operating model in mind, you make sure that these different initiatives are aligned and they are all targeting the same end state. And the final thing is, don't forget that transformation is always about people, so it is absolutely crucial to get people on board. And while in the past, when it was just about pure cost reduction, very often functionally driven, a pure top-down approach where you set a target and put pressure on people might have worked, that is no longer the case. But you need to win people, and you need to motivate them to achieve together with you the same target for your company.
Well, thank you, Hagen. That's very insightful. And From my perspective, my takeaway listening to you talk, what stays in my mind are those three key ingredients for success you mentioned earlier, about being clear about your strategy, making sure you're aligned across the organization, and again, as you just said in response to my last question, winning employees' hearts and minds. So on that note, I'd like to thank my guests today, Hagen, Goetz, Hastenteufel, and Mirjam Telzerow. Thank you. I'd also like to thank our production engineer, Tom Klein. And thank you for listening to this edition of The Wave of the Future. You'll find the Insights and Ideas paper entitled Getting Lean, Agile and Strong, Transformation in the Telecommunications Industry on our AT Kearney website at www.atkearney.com. If you have any comments on this podcast or have a suggestion for a podcast topic, please share your thoughts via Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @ATKearney. This has been an AT Kearney podcast production. Join us again soon for our next Wave of the Future podcast.